Take a moment to settle in, letting your body sink gently into the softness of your bed. Close your eyes, and with each breath, feel the tension begin to melt away. Imagine the stress of the day slowly dissolving, like a cloud drifting away in the evening sky. The night is here now, bringing with it a sense of quiet and calm. Picture yourself in a peaceful, serene place, maybe a quiet forest or by the ocean, where the world is still and everything is at rest. The soft whispers of the wind around you are gentle, comforting, and reassuring. Let each breath be deeper, slower, as your body and mind relax completely. Know that you are safe, that you are loved, and that the day's worries are far behind you. This is your time to rest, to recharge, and to let go of all that does not serve you. Tomorrow will be a fresh start, but for now, all you need to do is let go, drift into the peaceful embrace of sleep, and trust that everything will be okay. You deserve this moment of peace, and it's time to surrender to the comfort of a restful night. Let's dive into our story. Once upon a drizzle, in a kingdom where the clouds never tired of weeping, there lived a girl who could make it rain with a single giggle. Her name was Princess Puddle, and she was unlike any royal child in the long, puddle-splashing history of the kingdom of Droppleville. Her hair was the color of stormy clouds, wild and curly as the wind. Her cheeks were always flushed with joy, and her favorite sound in the world was the squelch of boots in soggy mud. Her crown wasn't gold or silver. It was woven from willow twigs, rain pearls, and tiny feathers dropped from sky-swimming birds. Princess Puddle was a mystery and a miracle. The people of Droppleville adored her. Whenever she skipped through the cobbled streets, wearing her famous splash-proof boots and humming the melody of thunder, children followed behind her like little ducklings. Shopkeepers smiled wider, cats dozed in windows with purrs that matched the rain's rhythm, and the kingdom felt just a little warmer, despite the constant damp. But here's the thing, the rain wasn't just always there. Not since Puddle was born. You see, the moment she came into the world, on a stormy Tuesday, the skies opened with joy, and it hadn't really stopped raining since. And if she laughed? Oh, heavens help the rooftops. A giggle storm would roll across the hills, and water would bubble up from garden fountains like fizzy soda. Her father, King Drizzle, a soft-spoken man with a beard like dew-soaked moss, adored her. Her mother, Queen Nimbus, once a mighty weather sorceress, had retired her wand the moment she held Puddle in her arms. They were proud, though perhaps a bit overwhelmed by her magic. One rainy afternoon, because, of course, all afternoons were rainy, Puddle stood on the palace balcony, watching clouds swirl like whipped cream in the sky. "I wonder what it's like," she whispered to her pet snail, Sir Slippy, who perched on her gloved hand, "to live somewhere the sun stays out longer than a sneeze." Sir Slippy blinked slowly, leaving a delicate silver trail across her palm. He was a good listener. She looked out over Droppleville. Umbrellas bobbed through the streets like jellyfish. Rain dripped from gargoyle noses. And the great puddle in the town square, which locals called Lake Teacup, rippled with laughter as children splashed through it, pretending they were sea pirates. And Princess Puddle smiled, because she loved her kingdom. But something inside her felt like mist on the edge of a rainbow, like a secret she didn't quite understand. Just then, a voice crackled behind her. "Puddling, darling," Queen Nimbus called from inside, "do try not to laugh too much today, The basement's still drying from yesterday's puddle quake." Puddle giggled, and a tiny puff of rain shot from her ears. "Oops," she whispered. "Sorry, basement." That evening, she sat at the dinner table with her parents. As usual, the roof above their royal dining hall was enchanted to stay clear, but you could still hear the gentle pattering of rain overhead like a lullaby. "Your lessons with Sir Splashford are going well?" her father asked between bites of moss pie. "He says I have excellent Puddle posture," Puddle said, proudly swinging her legs. Queen Nimbus cleared her throat. "And how about restraint?" Puddle tilted her head. "What's that?" Nimbus sighed gently. "It means holding back. Being careful." "But my giggles are part of me," Puddle said, suddenly quieter. "Why would I hold them back?" Neither parent had an easy answer. And so, after dessert, raindrop jellies, of course, Princess Puddle went to bed with a tangle of thoughts swirling like a small thunderstorm in her heart. Outside her window, the moon peeked through the clouds. A lullaby of drips echoed on the windowsill. Sir Slippy snoozed in a tiny hammock made of leaf. And in the silence before sleep, Puddle whispered, "Maybe there's more to my giggles than anyone knows." The next morning, the sun tried, really tried, to peek through the clouds. It made a small appearance for precisely 4 minutes, which, in Droppleville, was enough for 3 people to scream, "What is that?" and 1 sheep to faint. Princess Puddle sat on the windowsill of her tower room, dangling her booted feet outside. She had a bowl of cloudberry cereal in her lap. Sir Slippy perched next to the spoon, licking dew off a berry with great enthusiasm. Today, something felt different. There was a tingle in the air. Not the kind before thunder. Not even the kind before hiccups. Something in her chest buzzed, like a laugh waiting to be let out. She didn't quite know why. Her lessons began at the usual time. Sir Splashford, her royal etiquette instructor, who was, of course, a very proper goose in a raincoat and monocle, waddled into the great hall with a puddle mirror strapped to his back. "Today," he honked, "we shall work on your splash balance. It is most uncouth for a princess to fall backward into a mud-hole mid-curtsy." Puddle nodded solemnly, trying not to grin. But Sir Slippy blew a wet raspberry from her shoulder, and she burst out laughing. And that's when it happened. It started as a low rumble. The floor of the hall shivered. Candles flickered. A drop of rain ran up the wall instead of down. Sir Splashford dropped his monocle with a horrified honk. "Oh, feathers," he muttered. "She's having a giggle storm." Puddle clapped her hands over her mouth. Too late. With a mighty crackle of laughter, the sky darkened. Not with anger, not with rage, but with pure, rolling joy. Thunder giggled in the distance like a bellyful of bouncing kittens. Then came the rain. But not normal rain. The droplets were bigger, bouncier. They hit the rooftops with soft splats, like whipped cream pies from the sky. Children in the streets shouted in delight as umbrellas flipped inside out and buckets overflowed in seconds. In the castle, water started seeping in through the stained glass windows. In the pantry, a bag of flour floated past the cook's ankles. In the royal bathhouse, the royal rubber ducks staged a daring escape, surfing waves of giggle rain down the hall. And Princess Puddle? She just kept laughing. Not because she wanted to flood the castle, but because something in her heart had been waiting, yearning, for this storm. It was like years of holding back her biggest laughs, her wildest joy, and finally it had to come out. When the rain finally eased hours later, and the sky returned to its usual sleepy gray, the damage was notable. King Drizzle stood knee-deep in the throne room, which now looked more like a swamp with velvet curtains. Queen Nimbus had her boots on and was directing mop crews with a weather wand she hadn't touched in years. And Puddle? She was sitting on the palace steps, her hair soaked, her cheeks sore from smiling, but her heart quiet now. Peaceful. "I'm sorry," she whispered, watching a frog hop by on a floating dinner plate. Sir Slippy nuzzled her hand with his tiny shell. She looked up to see her mother approaching, cloak dripping. "Puddle," the queen said softly, kneeling beside her, "are you all right?" "I didn't mean to make it so big," Puddle said. "It just came out. I didn't even feel angry or scared. Just full." Queen Nimbus sighed and looked out over the soaked courtyard. "It's all right to be full of something," she said. "Joy, especially. But sometimes too much joy all at once can tip the clouds. Puddle tilted her head. So what do I do? Stop laughing? Oh no, the queen smiled gently. But maybe it's time you learned how to shape your laughter. Puddle blinked. You can do that? Her mother nodded. You were born with wild weather magic, Puddle. The kind even I don't fully understand. But there are those who might. Who? The weather weavers, said Queen Nimbus, eyes twinkling like rain-kissed stars. The oldest cloud makers in the sky. They live high in the mists beyond the mountains, weaving weather with thread and thunder. Puddle's heart leapt. Can I meet them? Queen Nimbus placed a hand on her shoulder. If you're ready. Puddle didn't even have to think about it. I am. That night, Puddle couldn't sleep. She lay in her bed watching moonlight flicker across the ceiling. She imagined towers of mist, needles of lightning stitching clouds, and ancient weavers whispering secrets into the rain. She didn't know what they would teach her, or what storm she might have to face, but for the first time, she felt something new stirring in her chest. Not a laugh. Not a storm. A calling. And even Sir Slippy, curled up in a tiny walnut shell beside her pillow, seemed to sense that something important had begun. The Great Drizzle Hall hadn't been this full since the annual umbrella juggling competition of '04. Every chair around the crescent-shaped council table was taken and dripping. Each council member wore a different kind of rain hat, as was tradition in Droppleville. The Duke of Drains wore a giant upside-down teacup. The Countess of Clogs wore a hat made entirely from waterproof shoe soles. Lady Spout wore her usual crown of copper pipes, which occasionally gurgled ominously. The room smelled like damp paper, old biscuits, and barely concealed panic. Queen Nimbus sat at the head of the table, composed as always. King Drizzle stood beside her, quietly wringing out his royal socks. In the center of the table was a large puddle, magically suspended in a glass bowl, showing flickering images of the great giggle storm from the day before. A fountain erupting from the palace chimney. 2 swans surfing on a rogue wave through the rose garden. A footman clinging to a chandelier like a soaked cat. It was, in a word, dramatic. Lady Spout cleared her throat. With all due respect, your majesties, this cannot continue. She nearly turned the library into a lagoon, barked the Duke of Drains. 3 volumes of Dripping Through History are now unreadable. 5, actually, sniffed the royal librarian from under a rain hood. The rest are being air-dried above the fireplace. I for one, said Sir Gurgle, the kingdom's plumbing advisor, support the princess. She's a marvel. A living storm system. She's a child, Queen Nimbus said calmly. A gifted one, yes, but she's still learning. Exactly, shouted Countess Clogs. And her lessons are soaking the kingdom. If she were anyone else. She's not, King Drizzle interrupted, voice gentle but firm. She is our daughter. And she needs guidance. Not punishment. Silence fell. The room echoed with the slow plink-plink of a leaky ceiling. At that moment, the heavy doors creaked open. And there she stood, Princess Puddle. Boots splashed quietly as she stepped into the chamber. Her curls were slightly damp, and she held her head high. Behind her, Sir Slippy slid in with great dignity, riding a damp scroll like a magic carpet. I heard you were meeting about me, Puddle said. Queen Nimbus opened her mouth to object, but Puddle raised a hand, small but steady. I know I caused the flood. I didn't mean to. I just laughed. And the rain came. It always does. The council shifted in their wet seats. I'm not sorry I laughed, she said, looking them each in the eye. But I am sorry it got out of control. Lady Spout raised a skeptical eyebrow. And what do you propose, Your Highness? Puddle took a breath. I want to go learn how to control it. Really learn. From the Weather Weavers. Several council members gasped. The name was ancient, older than even the castle stones. The Weavers, muttered the Duke. They're just a legend. They're not, Queen Nimbus said quietly. They're real. I trained with them when I was young. That made everyone go very quiet. Puddle turned to the Queen. You did. Nimbus nodded, eyes far away. Long ago, before I was queen, I wandered the foggy passes, climbed the storm ladders, followed the sound of wind chimes in the clouds. They taught me how to braid sunlight into mist and silence into snow. And they can help me? Puddle asked. I believe so, her mother said. If you're brave and ready. I am, said Puddle. The council murmured among themselves. She's too young. She's too powerful. She's too damp. But then Sir Slippy did something quite unexpected. He stood up on his tail and let out a very serious, very slow snail honk. Everyone blinked. Even Lady Spout leaned forward and whispered, Did that snail just make a point? King Drizzle smiled. He did. Queen Nimbus stood. Then it's decided. At dawn tomorrow, the princess will begin her journey. To the weavers. Puddle beamed. Sir Slippy did a triumphant twirl in her pocket. And as the meeting ended and the council slowly trickled out, shaking water from their hats, Princess Puddle felt something new stirring inside her again. Not just for herself, but for her kingdom. She was going to learn to dance with the clouds, not be ruled by them. She was going to learn how to shape the storm. At first light, the castle courtyard glistened like a pearl. Morning mist drifted low over the cobblestones, curling around puddles like sleepy cats. Dewdrops hung from every lantern and lamppost, catching the sun just enough to remind the kingdom what gold might look like. Princess Puddle stood at the gates in her finest travel cloak, a deep blue woven with silver thread and tiny cloud-shaped buttons. Her boots had been polished until they shone like wet moonlight. Sir Slippy, snug inside a travel pouch on her shoulder, peeked out with eager antennae. Queen Nimbus stood beside her, holding a weatherstone, a clear crystal wrapped in soft fog, and the wind carried a hushed reverence as she spoke. The path to the weather weavers isn't straight. It's not marked on any map, she said. You must listen. To the clouds. The wind. Your heart. I will, Puddle whispered. Nimbus knelt and pressed the weatherstone into her daughter's palm. This will guide you when you feel lost. It glows when the air around you listens. Trust it. Puddle curled her fingers around the stone. It was warm, like something alive. Then King Drizzle stepped forward and wrapped his arms around her. Make us proud, my little storm cloud. I'll come back better, she promised. We already think you're enough, he said, smiling. And so, with nothing but her courage, her companion, and her laughter carefully tucked inside, Princess Puddle set out on her journey. She walked north, past the singing swamps, where reeds hummed lullabies in the breeze. She crossed the bridge of umbrellas, where tiny winged creatures held umbrellas over passing travelers, rain or shine. For days she walked through forests thick with mist and hills that shimmered with ghost rainbows, faint arcs only seen when you closed one eye and whispered a wish. The weatherstone didn't always glow. Sometimes it dimmed to a faint shimmer. But when Puddle stopped, listened to the wind, and felt the air on her skin, it began to glow again, leading her like a heartbeat. One chilly morning, high in the cloud-soaked hills, Puddle arrived at the base of a towering cliff. Above her, a winding staircase carved from stone disappeared into the sky. The wind whispered, "Climb." So she did. Step after step, higher and higher, through vapor and silence, until the world below vanished into fog. Sir Slippy clung tightly to her cloak as the air grew thinner and colder. Then, suddenly she stepped through a cloud and into the skyfold. It was like walking into a painting. The sky above was not blue, but a shifting tapestry of lavender, silver, and soft gold. Giant clouds hovered around her like buildings, some tall and wispy, some wide and fluffy like marshmallow mountains. Threads of light drifted between them, crisscrossing like threads on a loom. And there, in the center of it all, stood a massive platform of woven wind and light, a loom the size of a castle, spinning clouds like cotton candy. Around it, floating in slow, graceful movements, were the weather weavers. They looked both old and ageless, wrapped in robes of mist and starlight. Some were translucent as fog, others sparkled like morning frost. Their eyes shimmered with storm knowledge, and their hands moved with quiet purpose. One of them noticed Puddle. She glided forward, her voice like soft thunder. "You've come." Puddle nodded. "I'm Princess Puddle of Droppleville." I want to learn how to shape my weather. The weaver smiled, and the sky rippled around her. We've been expecting you. They led her into the hall of echoing winds, where whispers of ancient storms danced through the air. You are more than a child with laughter, said the first weaver. You are a thread in the tapestry, said the second. You do not cause storms, said the third. You are one. Puddle blinked. But I don't want to hurt anyone. I just want to be me. The weavers circled her, hands raised. Then you must learn the ways of balance. They placed her hand on the great loom of weather. At first, she felt nothing. But then, a hum. A vibration. And suddenly she saw. Rainbows wove into mist like stories. Laughter twined with sunshine to form light rain. Tears of sadness became snowflakes. Anger knotted into lightning. Calm flowed like wind. Her own threads were tangled, wild, bright, beautiful, but unspooled. The weaver's voice echoed softly. You do not need to silence your storm, only learn to guide it. Puddle closed her eyes and began to learn. That night, she dreamed of sky cities, of dancing with thunderclouds, of laughter that grew gardens, not floods. And when she woke, her weather stone glowed brighter than ever. Sir Slippy poked his head out and whispered, in the way snails whisper without words. You're changing. Puddle smiled. Yes, she said. And I think it's just the beginning. Back in Droppleville, the birds woke early. Not because of the sunrise. Not because of the usual morning drizzle. But because of something so rare, so odd, and so unnatural, they didn't quite know what to do with themselves. It was silent. The pitter-patter of rain on rooftops was gone. No drips from windowsills. No squelching of boots. No umbrellas bobbing in the square. For the first time in living memory, the skies above Droppleville were clear. Cloudless. The villagers stood in their doorways blinking up, hands shading their eyes from an unfamiliar glare. Is this what they call sunshine? Asked the florist, squinting at the light. Feels threatening, said a baker, nervously adjusting his apron. It's unsettling, whispered Lady Spout, peeking out from behind a curtain, clutching her backup poncho. In the castle, Queen Nimbus stood on the balcony, her hair loose and silver in the morning light. She reached out a hand and nothing, not a drop. Her weather wand, which usually hummed softly in the presence of moisture, was silent. Something was very wrong. Elsewhere, in the far heights of the skyfold, Princess Puddle felt it too. She had been studying with the weavers for nearly a week, learning how to guide rain into dance, how to shape clouds with her breath, and how to laugh without losing control. But this morning, she woke with a strange heaviness in her chest, like something inside her had stopped moving. The weavers noticed it too. The threads are stiff, murmured one, examining the loom. Something is blocking the flow, said another, tracing a tangled knot of wind and light. Then the third turned to Puddle. Your kingdom is quiet. Puddle gasped. No rain. They nodded. But that's impossible, she said. It always rains. Always. Until now, the first said. Balance is not just about too much. It is also about too little. Puddle stood, heart pounding. Is it because I left? No, said the weaver softly. It is because your magic has grown. And with growth comes change. Sir Slippy climbed onto her shoulder, eyes wide. He could feel it too, a kind of brittle dryness, like the sky had forgotten how to breathe. Puddle looked out over the edge of the skyfold. The horizon stretched far below, showing tiny glimmers of her homeland and the odd, bright gleam of sun. I have to go back, she said, even if I'm not finished learning. You are not finished, said one weaver, but you are ready to try. The others nodded. You must return, said another. The kingdom is part of you as you are part of it. But remember, the last added, you cannot control the rain with fear. Only with feeling. Puddle took one last look at the loom, where threads of cloud light shimmered with stories untold. Then she tightened her cloak, tucked the weather stone into her pocket, and began her descent. The journey back felt different. The singing swamps had gone quiet. The umbrella bridge was dry. The jellyfish-like umbrella creatures flopped sadly and used. Everything felt off. When Puddle reached the castle gates, she found Queen Nimbus waiting. Her mother didn't speak at first, she just pulled her daughter into a fierce hug. "It's too quiet," Nimbus whispered into her hair. "I know," said Puddle. "I felt it. The balance is broken." They walked together through the streets. Without rain, the air was heavy and still. The trees drooped. The fountains had stopped singing. Children kicked dry leaves instead of splashing in puddles. People looked up as Puddle passed. Some bowed. Others stared with a quiet hope, the kind that clung like mist. "Can you bring it back?" asked the baker. "I'm not sure," she said honestly, "but I'm going to try." That night, Puddle climbed to the very top of the palace, to the Weather Watch Tower, where her mother once studied the sky. She stood alone. She closed her eyes. And for the first time, she didn't try to create rain. She just listened. She felt the dryness in the air. The waiting. She felt the tangled threads of her power, still wild, still shimmering, but calmer now. More focused. She thought of laughter, of joy, of sorrow, of all the times she'd splashed and soaked and stormed without understanding what her feelings were trying to say. And then she opened her arms to the sky. She didn't laugh. She didn't cry. She sighed. A long, deep, warm sigh that carried everything she was. Her joy, her worry, her growth, her love for this soggy kingdom. And somewhere above, the clouds stirred. A soft rumble rolled across the sky. A single drop fell. Then another. It wasn't a storm. Not a giggle storm. Not a puddle quake. Just soft, gentle rain. The kind that kisses cheeks and feeds gardens. The kind that carries memories in its rhythm. People rushed outside to feel it. Laughter echoed through the streets. The trees lifted their branches. The fountains began to sing again. And Princess Puddle stood in the tower, arms open, letting the rain wash over her. She hadn't laughed. She hadn't forced it. She had simply felt. And the sky had listened. The rain returned to Droppleville like an old lullaby, soft, familiar, and full of quiet comfort. But something had shifted. It wasn't the endless drizzle of before, nor the chaotic storms of unchecked giggles. Now, the rain seemed to listen, arriving gently when needed, retreating when not, like a friend who understood your silences. The townspeople noticed. So did the trees. Even the cobblestones sparkled differently under this new kind of sky. And at the heart of it all stood Princess Puddle, still a child, still learning, but now aware of something much bigger than her laughter or her powers. But peace never lasts forever in stories like these. It started 3 nights later. Puddle was in the palace garden, helping replant some soggy tulips with Sir Slippy supervising from the rim of a watering can. The sky had gone a moody indigo, and the wind had a strange hum in it, like a far-off cello note held too long. Suddenly, her weather stone began to pulse, not softly like before, but with urgency. Its glow shifted from calm blue to flickering violet, casting strange shadows across her boots. She held it up, and a whisper, half wind, half word, brushed past her ear. "Thunder Peak." She blinked. "What?" Sir Slippy wobbled in his shell, alarmed. The queen, appearing behind her, already knew. She'd felt it too. "The sky is calling you again," Nimbus said, voice quiet. "But I thought I fixed it," Puddle replied, heart pounding. "You balanced what was here," her mother said. "But balance is only half the story. Power without understanding is still dangerous." Puddle looked at the stone again. It pulsed with something more than magic now. It pulsed with invitation. That night, Queen Nimbus sat beside Puddle on the edge of her bed. "Thunder Peak is not a place many go," she said softly. "It's older than the castle. Older than Droppleville itself. Some say it's where the first weather was born. Where the sky learned to feel." "Is it dangerous?" Puddle asked. "Yes," the queen answered. "But not in the way you think." She touched her daughter's cheek. "The danger is not what you'll find. It's what you'll face." Puddle nodded slowly. She wasn't afraid, not exactly. She was ready, in that strange way where bravery and nervousness hold hands. The journey to Thunder Peak began at dawn. Sir Slippy, as always, was prepared. He'd packed a tiny bag of moss biscuits and wore a walnut shell helmet. Puddle wore her storm cloak and carried nothing else but her weatherstone and a quiet determination. She followed the mountain paths past where even the weavers had once dared to tread. The air grew thinner, the mist heavier. Trees became twisted, wind-worn shadows of themselves. The soil sparkled faintly, as if lightning had kissed it long ago. Each step forward felt like stepping into a memory not her own. The earth hummed with old storms. Halfway up, the weatherstone flared so brightly that the path in front of her shimmered and split. Two trails now lay ahead. One dark and jagged, laced with swirling storm clouds. The other calm and sun-dappled, with soft winds whispering through golden grass. Sir Slippy looked between them and made a questioning glorp. Puddle hesitated. Which way leads to Thunder Peak? A voice drifted from nowhere, everywhere. The path you fear will show you truth. Puddle looked at the stormy path. Her heart thudded. It looked wild, dangerous, like the inside of her mind on a bad day. But something in her, something new, said, "Go there." And so she did. The storm trail was not kind. Lightning crackled above, but never struck. The wind pushed sideways, whispering doubts and memories she hadn't thought about in years. You laughed and flooded the kingdom. You're too much. You're not ready. She walked anyway. The deeper she went, the more the storm became familiar. Not frightening, but honest. It didn't lie. It revealed. It showed her every time she'd been afraid of her own joy. Every moment she'd swallowed her laughter to avoid causing chaos. At last, she came to a clearing in the clouds, a quiet place. There stood a single figure, cloaked in shadows and sparks. The Rainkeeper. They were not tall, not imposing, just steady. Their eyes were the color of storms in summer, dark but alive. You've come far, the Rainkeeper said. I want to understand, Puddle said, why my magic feels so big. Because you're part of something that isn't meant to be small. The Rainkeeper reached into the air and pulled out a thread of sky, blue and silver, pulsing with light. This is what you are, they said. Not a source of weather, a mirror of it. I don't get it, she whispered. Your emotions don't cause storms. They ride them. The sky responds because it knows you're listening. Puddle stared at the thread. It shimmered, tangled at one end. I thought I had to control it. No, the Rainkeeper said gently. You must befriend it. Shape it. Like a dance. Not a leash. Puddle felt her heart crack open. Not in sadness, but in recognition. This was what she'd needed all along. When she opened her hand, the weatherstone lifted into the air and dissolved, not gone, but changed. Its magic flowed into her, lighting her from the inside out. For the first time, she didn't feel like she had to hold back. She felt balanced, like a storm in perfect stillness. The Rainkeeper smiled. Now go. The sky is waiting. Princess Puddle descended Thunder Peak in silence. Not because she was afraid, but because something in her had changed shape. Sir Slippy curled up against her neck, already asleep, dreaming, perhaps, of rain clouds that whispered lullabies. And overhead, the sky rumbled softly, not in warning, in welcome. The valley beyond Thunder Peak was unlike any place Puddle had seen. It was shaped like a smile, a soft curve carved into the earth, lined with mist-draped willows and stones smooth as old lullabies. At its center lay the laughing lake, though it didn't really look like it laughed. It didn't ripple. It didn't shimmer. It just waited, still and silver like a mirror, a perfect reflection of everything around it, except the sky. Where there should have been clouds or stars, the lake's surface showed something else. Something alive. Princess Puddle stood at the water's edges. Sir Slippy blinked slowly, the fine hairs on his antennae trembling. He had heard of this place, in stories whispered by moss snails and puddle sprites, a lake that showed not your face, but your truth. She knelt beside the water. No wind, no bugs, just silence, like the lake was holding its breath. When she peered into it, expecting her own reflection, she gasped. It was her, but younger. 4 or 5 years old, laughing wildly in the middle of a rainstorm. Mud splashed up her legs. Her hair stuck to her cheeks. She spun in circles, soaked, giggling so hard her eyes squinted shut. Behind her, the castle walls blurred. So did the adults watching, uncertain, worried. In the lake, the laughter grew louder, echoing out loud now. The lake was laughing with her. Or maybe through her. And then, just as suddenly, the image changed. Now she saw a moment she hadn't remembered in years. Her 7th birthday. Balloons. Rain cake. Her trying to blow out candles, but her excitement caused a downpour that turned the frosting into soup. Everyone laughed nervously, but she ran inside, humiliated. Her parents comforted her. But something inside her had started to believe. Too much joy ruins things. She reached out and touched the lake. Ripples. And with them, came a whisper. You locked away your brightest joy, little storm. You feared what it could do. But joy locked away becomes thunder. Puddle sat back, breath catching in her throat. She understood now. Her greatest power wasn't just the ability to call storms. It was her capacity to feel. To fully feel joy, yes, but also fear, wonder, pain, and laughter that wasn't always perfect. That was messy, human. The lake shimmered again. This time, a different reflection appeared. Not of her. Not even of someone she recognized. It was a young woman in silver gray robes, hair tied back in a rain-slick bun, sitting by a window sketching clouds. Then the view shifted. The woman now stood atop the same skyfold loom Puddle had trained at. She moved like wind, wove like breath. She spun thunder into lullabies. Puddle's heart skipped. "Mother," she whispered. It was Queen Nimbus, young, unsure, yet radiant with stormlight. The lake whispered again. "She was once like you." Tears welled up in Puddle's eyes. Not of sadness, but of awe. She had always seen her mother as someone strong, composed, perfectly still in every kind of storm. But now she saw the truth. Queen Nimbus had become that stillness. She had earned it. And so could Puddle. She stood slowly. Sir Slippy made a soft cooing sound. Even he seemed humbled. "I'm not broken," Puddle said aloud. "I'm becoming." The lake glowed silver, then faded back to stillness. The moment had passed, but what it left behind in her chest would not leave. She didn't have to fear joy, or grief, or magic. She just had to meet it, face it, feel it. Before leaving, Puddle bent down one more time. She cupped her hands and scooped a tiny amount of lake water into a glass bottle, the lake's blessing. As she sealed the cork, a ripple ran across the surface behind her, then stilled again. The laughing lake never spoke twice. But it had given her what she needed. Not just a memory, a mirror. By dusk, Puddle had returned to Droppleville. The sky opened for her, not stormy, not silent, but soft, balanced. The moment her boots touched the cobbled road, the puddles at her feet rippled with a kind of recognition. Children cheered. Elders bowed. Even the chimneys puffed slightly more proudly. She met her mother in the garden. Queen Nimbus saw the change in her daughter instantly. "You went to the lake," she said, smiling. Puddle nodded. "And I remembered how to laugh. Not just the kind that sparked giggle storms. The kind that heals." The day after Puddle's return from the laughing lake, a silence descended over Droppleville, not the kind of quiet that weighed heavy, but one that hung in the air, pregnant with possibility. The streets sparkled, the air felt alive, and the people knew something had shifted. The rains had returned, but this time, they felt different. But within the castle, something more pressing was unfolding. Princess Puddle had spent the day wandering the gardens, weaving between the puddles, touching the earth, listening to the breeze. Sir Slippy sat perched on her shoulder, offering soft, philosophical coos as they both observed the world changing around them. The kingdom felt like it was waiting for her next move. And that evening it came. Queen Nimbus had summoned her to the royal chamber. The fire in the hearth crackled, casting long shadows against the stone walls. On the table before them lay a crown, a simple, weathered thing. Its form was not elaborate or adorned with jewels, but it hummed with power. The storm crown. Puddle stared at it, feeling a strange pull in her chest. It looked almost familiar. "Do you know what this is, Puddle?" her mother asked, her voice gentle but firm. Puddle nodded. "It's the storm crown, the symbol of the rainkeeper." "Yes," Nimbus said, her eyes softening. "It was passed down through the generations, forged long before our kingdom was built, in the heart of Thunder Peak. It grants its bearer dominion over the weather, a direct connection to the sky itself." Puddle swallowed. "And you want me to wear it?" Her mother's gaze turned serious, not unkind but full of a quiet understanding. "I do. The kingdom needs someone who can shape the storms, bring balance, and maintain the delicate flow between the land and the sky. You have the gift, Puddle. You've learned to listen, to feel, to guide your magic instead of fight it. You've grown." Puddle's heart thudded in her chest. Was she truly ready for this? Was she prepared to be the one who carried that responsibility, that weight? But "I'm just a child." The words felt strange as they left her lips. How can I take on something so important? What if I fail? Nimbus smiled softly. "You are not just a child anymore, Puddle. You have already begun the journey that so many never even dare to start. This crown is not just a symbol of power, it is a symbol of your connection to the world, to the sky, to everything that moves with the weather." But Puddle hesitated. "What if I don't want to wear the crown? What if I want to keep learning? I still don't know everything. I still have so much to discover about myself, my magic." "I understand," Nimbus said, placing a hand on her daughter's shoulder. "No one is ever truly ready when they first take up the crown. It's not about having all the answers. It's about knowing that you will find the answers, that you will keep learning, just as you've always done." Puddle looked at the crown again, studying its simple design. It wasn't grand or shiny, but she could feel its weight, not physically, but in the quiet hum that reverberated in the air around it. The crown was not just an object. It was a part of the weather itself. And she realized then she had been carrying its weight all along. She had learned to listen to the storm, to feel its pulse, to laugh with it, to cry with it, to respect it. Maybe the crown wasn't just something to wear. Maybe it was something she already had inside her. Puddle sat down in front of the table, her fingers hovering over the crown. Sir Slippy, sensing the gravity of the moment, slowly crept down her arm and nestled into her lap. "I don't know if I'm ready, but..." She hesitated, the words coming from somewhere deep inside. Maybe being ready doesn't mean knowing everything. Maybe it just means trusting the storm. Nimbus watched her closely, her face a mixture of pride and understanding. "You've grown wise, my daughter. You've learned the most important lesson of all. It's not the crown that makes the keeper of the weather. It's the heart that wears it." Puddle took a deep breath, her heart swelling with emotion. She reached out, her fingers brushing the cool metal of the crown, and then, with a steady hand, she lifted it. It fit perfectly. As the crown settled upon her head, the room seemed to hum with an energy that Puddle had never felt before. The weatherstone, now hanging from her neck, began to glow once again, brighter than it ever had. The air around her shimmered as if the very sky was acknowledging her new role. The rain outside began to fall in a soft, rhythmic pattern, gentle yet full of life. The wind whispered through the open window, and the clouds seemed to gather in recognition. Puddle could feel it, the deep, ancient connection to the weather, to the land, to the sky. It was all hers, but not in a way that demanded control. It was a partnership, a trust. She smiled, feeling the weight of the crown not as a burden, but as a promise to the kingdom, to the sky, to the people she had always loved. "I'll do my best," she whispered, her voice barely more than a breath. "You already have," Nimbus said softly, pride clear in her eyes. "You already have." The next morning, Princess Puddle stood on the balcony overlooking Droppleville, the crown now settled into place. The weather was perfect. A soft mist hung over the castle grounds, the sky a gentle canvas of clouds, and the air felt alive with possibility. She closed her eyes and took a deep breath. The storm inside her no longer felt like something to fear. It felt like a part of her, like a rhythm in her heart. The winds whispered to her, the clouds greeted her, and the rain moved in harmony with her breath. Puddle smiled. The crown wasn't just a symbol. It was a reminder of who she had always been, a storm born of laughter, but also of wisdom, courage, and balance. And now, she would shape the weather not just for herself, but for the entire kingdom. The days following Puddle's coronation as Keeper of the Storms passed in a whirlwind of new experiences. She spent her time learning the deep secrets of the weather, how it was tied not only to her emotions but to the land itself. Every cloud, every gust of wind, every drop of rain carried with it a message. A song of sorts, ancient and full of meaning. But despite her new powers, despite the growing sense of confidence that came with wearing the storm crown, she knew there was one thing she couldn't control: the balance. And that balance was beginning to waver. It started with a series of strange storms. They were nothing like the playful, whimsical rain showers that Puddle had been used to. These were intense, chaotic. Raging winds howled through the kingdom, uprooting trees, tearing down fences, and flooding the streets of Droppleville. The clouds gathered in angry formations, dark and oppressive, as if they were carrying something heavy in their depths. The first storm lasted for hours, and the second one came only a day later, more violent than the last. The people were starting to worry. And Puddle? She was starting to feel it. It was early in the morning when the third storm arrived. The air was thick with tension. Puddle stood on the balcony of the castle, watching the clouds swirl above her. They churned in unnatural ways, twisting into spirals that seemed to defy the normal patterns of weather. She could feel the power of the storm growing stronger. It was as if the weather itself had become something unpredictable, something out of control. Sir Slippy, who had grown used to her new role, crawled up to her shoulder with a worried look in his eyes. "The storm feels wrong," he said, his tiny voice shaky. "It's like the sky is angry at you." Puddle's heart skipped a beat. She had never felt the weather turn against her before. It was as though the winds were rebelling against her control. She had always been able to listen to them, to guide them, but now they seemed to be ignoring her. "No," she whispered, her fingers tightening around the weatherstone that hung from her neck. "This isn't about me. Something's wrong." The storm above her seemed to answer. A bolt of lightning struck the castle walls, sending a tremor through the ground. At that moment, Queen Nimbus entered the room, her face pale and tense. "The winds are not just a reflection of your heart, Puddle," she said, her voice heavy with concern. "Something is disturbing the balance, and it's more than just a storm." Puddle looked at her mother, confusion spreading across her face. "What do you mean? I thought I had learned to balance the weather. I've listened. I've respected it. Nimbus held up a hand, silencing her. "It's not about you. Not entirely. This storm, it feels like the elements themselves are in conflict." "The elements?" Puddle echoed. "But how can that be? The sky, the earth, the water, the wind, they've always danced together, haven't they?" "Yes," her mother said, her voice grim. "But what happens when one element tries to overtake the others? When one becomes too strong, too forceful? The balance tips, and the harmony is broken." Before Puddle could respond, a loud crash sounded from outside. She rushed to the window and gasped. The clouds were swirling faster now, but it wasn't just the wind causing the disturbance. The ground beneath them was shifting, as though something deep below was fighting to rise. The air had become charged, crackling with energy, and the river running through Droppleville had swollen beyond its banks, spilling over the cobbled streets. "The earth is shifting. The water is rising," Puddle said, her voice trembling. "What's happening, Mother? Why is everything breaking apart?" Nimbus's face darkened. "The storm is only the beginning. If the elements are in conflict, they could tear the kingdom apart." Without another word, Puddle rushed out of the room. Sir Slippy scrambled to keep up, his small body wobbling in the wind. She made her way to the castle gates, where the people of Droppleville had gathered, looking up in fear at the sky. The storm was growing stronger by the minute, but Puddle could see the earth itself trembling, the ground splitting open, rocks and dirt shifting beneath their feet. The people cried out in panic, but Puddle held her hands up, her weatherstone glowing faintly. "Everyone, stay calm," she shouted, her voice carrying over the wind. "I will find out what's causing this. But we need to remain calm." She turned to Sir Slippy, who was huddling in her arms, his face full of concern. "We need to find the heart of this storm," she said. "The center, where it all began." The storm seemed to grow more violent the closer Puddle got to the river. The winds whipped around her, tearing at her cloak, but she pushed forward. The weatherstone pulsed in her hands, guiding her through the chaos. She reached the riverbank and stopped in her tracks. In the distance, where the river met the mountains, something was stirring. The earth was cracking open, and from the depths of the river, a massive whirlpool was beginning to form, an ancient and unnatural force, pulling everything in its path. "It's the heart of the storm," Puddle whispered. She could feel it now, the power, the tension. The elements had become enemies, battling for control. The earth was rising, the water was pulling, and the wind was sweeping everything away. With her heart pounding in her chest, Puddle stepped closer to the river, holding the weatherstone before her. "I can stop this," she said to herself. "I have to." But as she took another step, the ground beneath her feet shifted, sending her tumbling toward the water. The whirlpool's pull was too strong, dragging everything around it into its deep, dark center. "No!" Puddle cried out, reaching for anything to hold on to. "This isn't what I want." Suddenly, she felt a hand on her shoulder. It was Queen Nimbus, appearing as if by magic, her own crown of power shimmering in the storm's wild light. Her presence steadied Puddle, grounding her in a way that nothing else had. "We must not fight the elements," Nimbus said, her voice calm despite the chaos around them. "We must listen. The balance isn't about control, it's about understanding, guiding, and helping the elements work in harmony." Puddle nodded, her fingers trembling around the weatherstone. She closed her eyes and focused, reaching deep inside herself. She could feel the storm now, the wild chaos, but beneath it all was something ancient. Something she had to understand. As she reached out with her mind, she spoke to the storm, to the earth, to the wind, to the water. "Please," she whispered, "I understand. You're all trying to find your place. But you belong together. You are all part of one cycle, a dance. Not enemies, but partners." And in that moment, she felt the storm calm. The wind slowed. The ground stopped trembling. The river, once wild and turbulent, began to settle. The storm slowly faded, its energy dissipating into the sky. The kingdom was safe again. As the last of the clouds parted, revealing a sky full of soft stars, Puddle breathed a sigh of relief. Sir Slippy, perched on her shoulder, cooed softly, as if in approval. "I did it," Puddle whispered, her voice full of awe. "I really did it." Nimbus stood beside her, smiling with pride. "You didn't do it alone. You listened. You trusted the storm, and the storm trusted you." The kingdom was still. After the violent storm had passed, the winds seemed to sigh with relief, and the earth had ceased its trembling. The river had calmed to its normal flow, the fields had dried, and the people of Droppleville had slowly emerged from their homes, watching with awe as the last of the dark clouds rolled away, revealing a sky that was almost impossibly clear. Princess Puddle stood at the edge of the riverbank, her heart still pounding from the storm's intensity. Her hair was wet, tangled with the rain and the wild winds, but she barely noticed. She was too busy trying to make sense of what had just happened. Her fingers still clenched tightly around the weatherstone. The stone that had connected her so deeply to the weather, that had helped her control it, shape it, and even heal it. But now, in the aftermath of the storm, she felt a quiet tug within her, a whisper from deep inside, telling her there was still something she hadn't yet understood. "Mother!" Puddle called, her voice shaky but firm. Queen Nimbus had remained by her side throughout the storm, a steady anchor in the chaos. Now, as the skies brightened, she approached, her footsteps quiet on the damp earth. "You did it, Puddle," Nimbus said, her voice soft but proud. "You brought balance. You listened to the elements." "But what caused the storm in the first place?" Puddle asked, still unable to shake the feeling that something more was at play. "The earth and the river, they were so out of sync. The wind wasn't responding to me the way it used to. It was like they were fighting." Nimbus frowned, her brow furrowing with concern. The storm was not simply a reaction to your magic, Puddle. The elements don't fight each other without reason. Something is disrupting the natural flow. There is a force at work, something beyond our understanding, that is pulling at the very fabric of the world. Puddle turned to look at the river once more, feeling the weight of her mother's words. Do you know what this is? Puddle asked. Where it's coming from? Nimbus shook her head slowly. I don't, but I fear it is something we've neglected. Something that has been growing for some time, unnoticed. The two of them stood in silence for a while, the wind now soft, the clouds a delicate shade of lavender as dusk began to settle. The quiet felt heavy with unanswered questions, and Puddle could feel her thoughts swirling like the storm clouds that had once threatened the kingdom. There's something else, Puddle said, suddenly realizing what had been missing. The stone. It feels different, lighter, like it's lost some of its weight. The weather stone, once heavy and warm in her hands, now seemed strangely insubstantial. Puddle glanced at it, noting the way it barely glowed, its once brilliant pulse now a faint flicker, as though its power had dimmed. Nimbus studied it closely, her expression thoughtful. This could be a sign that the magic of the kingdom is being drained. Drained? Puddle echoed. But how? Her mother's eyes met hers. It's not the elements alone that create the balance in this kingdom, Puddle. It's the heart of the storm, the tempest's heart. The storm isn't simply a manifestation of weather. It's a living force. It sustains us. It sustains the entire kingdom. And if it begins to fade... She trailed off, as though the very thought was too terrible to voice. Puddle's heart thudded painfully in her chest. The tempest's heart? I've never heard of it. You wouldn't have, Nimbus said, her voice a whisper now. The tempest's heart is a secret of the Rainkeeper's lineage. It's the source of all our power. It's the beating pulse of the sky itself. Puddle's mind raced as she tried to understand. But if the tempest's heart is the source of our magic, why has it never been mentioned? Why was I never told about it? There are many secrets about the Rainkeeper's role that were kept from you, Puddle. Secrets meant to protect you, Nimbus explained. When the Rainkeeper's bloodline was first established, long before even I was born, it was said that the tempest's heart was hidden. It was kept away from the world to protect its power. If anyone ever found it, if its magic ever became corrupted, it could cause devastation. Puddle's mind was reeling. A heart, the heart of the storm, a power so great it could sustain the kingdom itself. But if it was corrupted, what happens if the tempest's heart is lost? She asked quietly. If it is lost, Nimbus said softly, the kingdom will fall. The storms will rage out of control, the elements will be torn apart, and everything we've built will crumble. The balance will be gone. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Puddle felt as though the world was shifting under her feet. She had thought she was merely learning to control the weather, to understand it, to guide it. But now, she realized, she was being entrusted with something much more powerful. Something far more dangerous. A part of her was overwhelmed with fear, but another part, the part that had stood on the balcony with the storm roaring around her, the part that had felt the pulse of the elements in her chest, knew that she couldn't turn away from this. I'll find it, Puddle said at last, her voice steady with resolve. The tempest's heart. I'll find it and restore balance. Nimbus nodded, her eyes filled with both pride and sorrow. You must, Puddle. You are the keeper of storms. And the storms will only listen to you. That night, Puddle lay awake in her chambers, staring at the ceiling, her mind buzzing with everything she had learned. The tempest's heart, a force of nature, hidden deep within the world. She had to find it. She had to save the kingdom. And yet, as she lay there, a question lingered in her mind. Where do I begin? The heart of the storm was no simple treasure to be found. It was a force, an ancient magic. To find it, she would need more than the Weatherstone. She would need the wisdom of the land, the guidance of those who had come before her, and, most of all, a willingness to confront the truth about herself. As dawn broke, Puddle stood before her mother once more, a determined look in her eyes. I'll need to travel, she said, her voice filled with purpose. I'll need to find the heart of the storm. I can't do this alone. Nimbus nodded, her expression softening. I'll give you what guidance I can, but remember, Puddle, the path to the tempest's heart is treacherous. It will test you, and you must be ready for whatever you find. I'm ready, Puddle said, though she wasn't entirely sure what that meant. But one thing was certain, the storm had only just begun. The morning after her decision to leave Droppleville felt heavy with anticipation. The air itself seemed to hold its breath, as if the kingdom were waiting for her to take the first step into the unknown. The storm crown sat upon her head, no longer just a symbol of her duty but a reminder of the immense responsibility she now carried. Princess Puddle stood at the castle gates, the weatherstone hanging from her neck, glowing faintly in the early light. Sir Slippy, who had become her constant companion, perched on her shoulder, his small eyes wide with both excitement and worry. He had always been a voice of reason, but this time, the journey ahead was beyond even his understanding. Are you sure about this? Sir Slippy asked, his voice tinged with concern. The tempest's heart isn't something to be taken lightly. No one's ever found it before. Puddle nodded, a quiet determination settling in her chest. I have to, Slippy. The kingdom needs me. And the storm, it won't stop until I do. Her mother, Queen Nimbus, had said her goodbyes in private, offering her daughter both wisdom and sorrow in equal measure. Puddle knew she wasn't just leaving her home, she was stepping into a world of uncertainty, a place where the elements themselves might turn against her. The kingdom had always been her world, its storms familiar companions. But this was different. The path to the tempest's heart was not one that could be charted on any map. It was a journey steeped in ancient myths, passed down in whispers from generation to generation. Some believed it lay beyond the great cliffs of Thunder Peak, where the storms were fiercest. Others spoke of a hidden valley, deep within the realm of the whispering winds, a place where the sky met the earth in ways no one fully understood. The first leg of Puddle's journey would take her through the forest of Mistral Hollow, an ancient, fog-shrouded wood that lay at the foot of Thunder Peak. It was said to be a place where the winds whispered secrets to those who listened carefully, and where travelers sometimes disappeared without a trace. But Puddle knew that this was the only way forward. She had to learn what the winds were trying to tell her. She had to understand the signs. As she entered Mistral Hollow, the trees towered above her, their branches twisting in unnatural shapes. The air felt cooler here, damp with the morning fog that clung to the earth like a heavy cloak. Every step she took seemed to echo in the silence, the world around her holding its breath. Sir Slippy huddled closer to her neck, his tiny claws digging into her shoulder. Something doesn't feel right, he whispered. It's too quiet. Puddle nodded, her senses alert. The wind was still here, but it didn't feel like the playful breezes she was used to. It was waiting, like a presence just beyond the edge of her perception. The sky was overcast, thick with clouds, and a faint mist curled through the trees like tendrils of forgotten memories. She closed her eyes for a moment, reaching out with her magic, trying to feel the winds. They were here, yes, but their usual flow was interrupted, as if something was blocking their natural course. Slippy, she said quietly, I think the winds are lost. Like they don't know where to go anymore. The tiny frog gave a low croak, clearly unsettled. I've heard tales of the hollow. The winds here don't always speak the truth. Some say they're trapped in the trees. Trapped? Puddle repeated, intrigued but cautious. By what? Slippy didn't answer right away. The trees around them seemed to shudder, and a cold gust of wind stirred the mist. It wasn't the kind of wind she was used to. This one was restless, frantic, as though it was searching for something or someone. Stay close, Puddle said, clutching the weatherstone in her hand as she continued down the narrow, winding path. She could feel the tension in the air. The storm that had raged in Droppleville was still lingering, but now, it felt like it was following her, waiting for something to break. Suddenly, the wind howled through the trees, sending a flurry of leaves tumbling through the air. Puddle stopped in her tracks, feeling a shiver run down her spine. The trees groaned as if they were speaking, and for a brief moment, she thought she heard a voice, a low, guttural whisper carried on the breeze. The heart beats still, but the storm rages. The winds are lost, Help us, keeper of storms." Puddle's heart skipped a beat. The voice was coming from the wind itself. It was not just a whisper, it was a call. A plea for help. "Did you hear that?" Puddle asked, her voice trembling. Slippy nodded, his eyes wide. "I did. But I don't know who it was." The wind surged around them again, stronger this time, as if urging them forward. The trees parted slightly, revealing a clearing just ahead. "Let's go," Puddle said, stepping cautiously into the clearing. The moment she crossed the threshold, the wind seemed to still. The clearing was bathed in an eerie twilight, the fog swirling in strange patterns. In the center of the clearing stood a massive stone monolith, weathered and cracked with age. It was shaped like an ancient, twisted tree, its roots plunging deep into the earth. The air around it hummed with energy, and Puddle could feel a surge of power emanating from it, a power both ancient and alive. "This is it," Puddle whispered to herself. "The heart of the storm. Or at least, a piece of it." Slippy hopped down from her shoulder, his eyes fixed on the stone. "I think we found something. But what is it?" Puddle stepped closer, her heart pounding as the winds began to stir again, this time with purpose. She raised her hand toward the stone, feeling the pulse of the weatherstone react. The wind, the rain, the clouds, all of it, it was connected to this place. The stone groaned, its surface beginning to glow with a faint blue light. The winds swirled around them, but this time, they didn't feel chaotic. They felt alive. A voice echoed in Puddle's mind, ancient and full of sorrow. "I have waited. I have watched. The keeper has come." Puddle's breath caught in her throat. "Who are you?" "I am the tempest's heart," the voice responded, its words echoing in the very air. "The storm that keeps the kingdom whole. But I am fractured, and the elements are unbalanced. The one who wears the crown must restore what has been lost." Puddle closed her eyes, reaching out with her magic, feeling the pulse of the stone beneath her fingers. "What happened to you?" she asked softly. "Why are you fractured?" The wind howled around her as if in grief, before the voice spoke again. "I was split, torn apart by those who sought to control me. Now I am scattered, hidden, lost in the winds. Only the keeper of storms can restore me. Only you, Puddle." Puddle's heart raced as she realized the magnitude of her task. She wasn't just seeking the tempest's heart. She was being called to heal it, to bring back the balance that had been lost, to restore the storm's true form. "Where do I find you?" Puddle asked, her voice full of determination. "Follow the winds, keeper. They will guide you. But beware, for the storms are not the only force at play. Something darker is watching." As the voice faded, the winds swirled around Puddle, lifting her hair in a chaotic dance. The stone's light dimmed, and the air grew still again. Puddle stood there for a long moment, absorbing the weight of what she had just learned. The storm wasn't just something to be controlled, it was something to be healed. But how could she heal it if she didn't even understand what had broken it? And what was this darker force that had been mentioned? Was it tied to the storms? Or was there something more sinister at play, something lurking in the shadows? The journey ahead would be even more dangerous than she had imagined. The winds had quieted, but the weight of the moment lingered. The stone, once humming with life, now seemed dormant, its pulse fading into a mere echo. Puddle stood in the clearing, her thoughts swirling like the wind had moments before. The words of the tempest's heart rang in her mind, and with them came a rising sense of dread. The storm had been broken, and something darker was at play. The air felt heavy, as though it was pressing against her chest, making every breath a little harder. The wind, once a familiar companion, now seemed to be pulling away, retreating into the forest beyond. It was almost as if it, too, was afraid of what lurked on the horizon. "Slippy!" Puddle's voice trembled slightly as she turned to her companion, who was perched on her shoulder, his small body tense. What did the tempest's heart mean by a darker force? Do you think it's connected to the imbalance in the elements? Slippy didn't respond immediately. His large eyes scanned the trees, his little body shifting nervously. "I don't know, Puddle, but something feels off. This place, it's not like the forest we've seen before. The winds, the trees, they don't feel right. They feel like they're hiding something. Puddle nodded. Her heart was heavy with the knowledge that her journey was about to take a darker turn. There had been whispers in the wind, but now, something else was in the air. A presence, something lurking just out of sight, waiting for the right moment to strike. She felt it before she saw it. A sudden chill, the hairs on the back of her neck standing on end. The ground beneath her feet seemed to shift, the mist in the air turning colder and thicker. She looked up, her senses on high alert, but the forest was still. Too still. "I think we're not alone," Puddle whispered, her hand tightening around the weatherstone. Before she could react, a low, rumbling growl echoed through the trees. It wasn't an animal, it was something deeper, darker, more ancient. A sound that vibrated in her chest, a warning that something dangerous was close. Slippy leaped from her shoulder, landing on a nearby rock, his wide eyes scanning the shadows. "Puddle, we need to leave. This isn't a good place." But Puddle didn't move. She couldn't. Something was drawing her in, a pull she couldn't explain, as though the shadows themselves were beckoning her closer. And then it appeared. From the darkness between the trees, a figure emerged. It was tall, cloaked in tattered black robes that billowed like smoke, the fabric moving with an unnatural life of its own. Its face was obscured by a hood, but Puddle could feel its gaze on her, a cold, penetrating force that made her skin crawl. "You seek the tempest's heart," the figure rasped, its voice like 1,000 whispers blended together, dark and hollow. "You seek to restore what has been lost. But you do not understand. You cannot heal what has been broken." Puddle's heart pounded in her chest. She had heard legends of creatures like this. The Shadowwalkers, ancient beings who thrived on imbalance, on chaos. They were said to be the very embodiment of destruction, feeding off the disarray between the elements. "I don't have to understand to restore balance," Puddle said, her voice steady, though her hands trembled with fear. "I know the storm is broken and I'm going to fix it." The Shadowwalker laughed, a sound that sent a chill down Puddle's spine, as though it were mocking her. "Fix it?" the figure sneered. "You cannot fix what has been undone. The Tempest's heart is mine. It is my power, and I will not let you take it from me." Puddle's stomach tightened. "You're the one who's been causing the storms. The imbalance in the elements, it's you." The Shadowwalker's form flickered in the mist, its voice growing darker, more menacing. "You are naive, Princess. You think the storms are simply a result of broken magic? They are a force of nature, a necessary destruction. The balance you seek is an illusion. The world cannot be healed. It must be torn apart, remade." Puddle felt her blood run cold. The words of the Tempest's heart echoed in her mind, "Something darker is watching." Was this the force that had fractured the heart of the storm? Was this the true cause of the chaos that had been spreading through the kingdom? "I won't let you destroy everything," Puddle said, her voice growing firmer, though her hands still shook. "I'm going to restore the Tempest's heart, and I'm going to stop you." The Shadowwalker chuckled, the sound echoing through the clearing like a distant thunderclap. "Do you think you can stop me, Keeper of Storms? You are nothing but a child playing at power," it said, stepping forward. The ground beneath its feet seemed to wither and crack, the air growing colder with every step it took. "You are but a fleeting moment in the world's grand design. The storm must rage. It is the way of things." "I don't believe that," Puddle said, her chest swelling with determination. She raised her hand, feeling the pulse of the weatherstone in her grasp. The stone had been her guide, her tool, her connection to the elements. She could feel the power coursing through her veins, a power that had been given to her not by the stone, but by her own connection to the storm. "You're wrong," she whispered, more to herself than to the Shadowwalker. "I believe that balance can be restored. And I will make it happen." With a deep breath, Puddle called out to the wind, reaching out with her magic, trying to harness the forces she had learned to control. The wind didn't come as easily as it used to. The pull of the Shadowwalker was strong, and the forces of imbalance were still at work. But Puddle didn't give up. She focused, gathering the storm in her heart. For a moment, the wind began to stir, faint at first, then stronger. The mist parted, and the sky above seemed to tremble in response. The Shadowwalker recoiled, its eyes narrowing as it realized what she was doing. "No," it hissed. "You cannot fight the storm. The storm is mine." But Puddle wasn't listening anymore. She was in tune with the wind now, the currents of the air, the rhythm of the storm that had been fractured. She could feel the pulse of the elements within her, and with a forceful command, she willed them to join together, to heal, to flow as they were meant to. The storm swelled in the sky, swirling above them like a living entity, as though it were responding to her call. The Shadow Walker staggered back, the very ground beneath it crackling and splintering as the storm began to grow, rising with Puddle's will. "You cannot contain me, Princess," the Shadow Walker spat, but its voice was losing strength, drowned out by the roar of the wind. "I don't need to contain you," Puddle said, her eyes alight with determination. "I just need to restore what was lost." With a final surge of power, the storm erupted into the sky, crackling with energy, fierce and untamed. The wind howled in defiance of the Shadow Walker's presence, and for the first time, Puddle felt the balance begin to return. The storm raged, but it was no longer chaotic. It was controlled, focused, and it was hers. The Shadow Walker screamed as the wind ripped through its form, its essence unraveling in the tempest's fury. In the face of such power, it had no choice but to retreat into the shadows, its form dissipating into the mist. Puddle stood, breathless, watching as the storm began to settle. The winds calmed, the clouds parted, and the faint glow of the tempest's heart flickered in the distance, a promise of the path ahead. "Slippy," Puddle gasped, her legs trembling beneath her, "we've done it. The storm, it's healing." The little frog gave a relieved croak, jumping back onto her shoulder. "We have Puddle. We've done it." But Puddle knew this was just the beginning. The storm had been restored, but there were still many questions left unanswered. What had the Shadow Walker been after? Why had it sought to fracture the tempest's heart? And most importantly, what would the next step in her journey reveal? The winds were still now, their violent roar replaced by an eerie calm. The storm that had raged in the sky, and in Puddle's heart, was beginning to subside. The sun peeked through the clouds, its rays breaking through the mist, casting an ethereal light across the clearing. The tempest's heart pulsed once more, its glow faint but steady. Puddle stood at the edge of the clearing, her hands trembling from the exertion of the storm. She had faced the Shadow Walker, overcome its darkness, and restored the balance of the winds, but the task was far from over. The tempest's heart still needed to be healed completely, and only one more challenge lay ahead, the tempest's trial. For centuries, the trial had been whispered about in the ancient texts of the Storm Keepers, but no one had ever completed it. No one had ever reached the heart of the storm without succumbing to its fury. The trial was not simply a test of strength or magic, it was a test of the spirit, of one's ability to withstand the raw power of the storm and face the fears within. Puddle took a deep breath, her heart racing with anticipation. This was it, the final step. As the winds swirled again around her, she heard the voice of the tempest's heart, faint but clear. "The trial has begun, Keeper of Storms. You must prove your worth." Puddle closed her eyes, summoning every ounce of her courage. She had already faced the Shadow Walker, but this would be different. This would be a trial that would test her resolve, her ability to control the elements, and, most importantly, her heart. The air around her shifted. A violent gust of wind whipped through the clearing, followed by a blinding flash of lightning that split the sky in two. The storm was not angry, it was alive, challenging her. Puddle raised her hand, feeling the weatherstone pulse against her chest, the connection to the storm growing stronger by the second. She focused, drawing in the energy from the storm, letting it flow through her body. Suddenly, the ground beneath her feet trembled, and a massive vortex of wind and lightning formed in the center of the clearing, swirling violently as it shot upward toward the sky. A deep rumbling sound filled the air, like the growl of some ancient beast waking from a long slumber. The voice of the tempest's heart echoed once more, "Face the storm, Keeper. Only then will the balance be restored." With a swift motion, Puddle took a step forward. The winds howled around her, the storm pressing in on all sides. This was not just a physical challenge, it was a battle of wills. The storm would try to break her, to push her to the edge, to make her doubt herself. The winds slammed into her, throwing her off balance. She staggered but stood firm, her feet planted in the earth. The storm roared around her, lightning striking the ground just inches from her feet. The tempest's heart pulsed brightly, as though urging her forward. "I will not be swayed. I will not be afraid." She closed her eyes and centered herself, reaching deep into the heart of the storm. The energy was chaotic, overwhelming, but it was also beautiful, a force that could create and destroy in the same breath. Puddle knew that this was the storm's true nature, and she had to embrace it, not fight it. "You must face your fear, princess," the voice of the tempest's heart said. "The storm will show you your deepest doubt. You must confront it if you are to restore the balance." Puddle's heart skipped a beat. Her fear? What was her fear? Suddenly, the winds twisted again, and before her, the storm began to take shape. It shifted, becoming a figure, one she knew all too well. It was her mother, Queen Nimbus, but not as she was now. This version of her mother was cold, distant, her eyes filled with disappointment. The air around her crackled with tension, the storm clouds swirling darkly above her head. "You failed, Puddle," the apparition of her mother said, her voice distant and harsh. "You were never meant to wield the tempest's heart. You will bring destruction to the kingdom, just like I did." Puddle's breath caught in her throat. Her mother's words cut deeper than any blade. She had always sought to be worthy of her mother's legacy, but was it true? Was she doomed to fail? "No," Puddle whispered, shaking her head. "I won't fail." The figure of her mother smirked, the storm around her intensifying. "You will never be strong enough to control the storm. It will consume you, just as it consumed me." Puddle's heart ached, but she refused to be swayed. She had already faced so many doubts on her journey. This was just one more fear she had to conquer. "I am strong," Puddle said, her voice growing steadier with each word. "And I will not let fear control me." With a surge of magic, Puddle focused on the storm, drawing on its power, channeling it through her heart and into her hands. The apparition of her mother faded, replaced by a blast of wind that cleared the dark clouds. The storm shifted, the shape of her mother dissolving into the swirling winds. The voice of the tempest's heart rang out in approval. "You have faced your fear, Keeper. You have proven your worth." The winds calmed. The storm no longer raged. Puddle's heart still beat loudly in her chest, but now it was a steady rhythm, in harmony with the storm. The tempest's heart pulsed brightly, its energy flowing back into the world. Puddle's breath was steady now, the trial behind her. She had faced the storm, not just the one outside, but the one inside her heart. And she had won. The skies cleared and the storm was at peace. The clouds parted to reveal the full light of the sun, casting warm rays over the land. The kingdom, which had long been battered by the storms, now felt calm and still. The balance had been restored. As Puddle stood in the clearing, the winds began to whisper around her once more, but this time, they were gentle, full of gratitude. They no longer felt fractured or lost. They were whole. A small voice echoed in her mind, the voice of the tempest's heart. "You have done it, Keeper of Storms. You have healed the heart of the tempest. The storm is at peace, and so is the kingdom." Puddle smiled, the weight of her journey finally lifting. She had done it. The storm had been restored, the balance had been healed, and her kingdom would finally know peace. As Puddle turned to leave the clearing, Sir Slippy hopped onto her shoulder, giving a satisfied croak. "Well, Puddle, you did it. You really did it." Puddle looked down at him, her heart light. "We did it, Slippy. Together." The sun shone brightly overhead as they made their way back to Droppleville, where the skies were clear, the winds were gentle, and the storm was no more. Princess Puddle had proven herself not just as the Keeper of Storms, but as a ruler with the strength to face her fears and restore balance to the world. And as they walked, the winds seemed to sing a song of hope, a song of a new beginning, where the storm was no longer a force of destruction, but a force of life.